Start with the Intel 4004, 1971, the world's first microprocessor built for a calculator. A Japanese firm called Busicom needed chips for a new printing calculator. Intel, back then just a memory company, designed something smarter, one tiny chip that did all the thinking. Intel clawed the rights back from Busicom for pocket change, the greatest deal in the history of computers. A deal that 50 years later would leave Intel racing to make other people's chips. It packed just 2,300 transistors and ran at 740 kilohertz, slower than a modern wristwatch, and yet it could outthink a room-sized computer from 1946. Every computer on Earth is still the same idea, sand and metal thinking. 2,300 transistors then, 50 billion now. At that scale, it's basically sorcery. Intel's 80086, the chip that taught the world to speak x86, the one IBM chose for its first PC, the trick that won the world. The 88 spoke 16 bits inside, but came through an 8-bit door, so it could talk to the cheap, common parts of 1981. That made the whole computer cheap enough to mass produce. Nobody in 1981 knew what they'd built, an instruction set called x86 that every program still stands on. Windows, Mac OS, the internet, the cloud, all of it a direct line of descendants from one 1978 chip. That one design became the longest marriage in technology, an architecture so sticky that 50 years of rivals could only ever fight around it. Intel's gamble, the 386, the chip that made computers personal. Kindness had nothing to do with Intel becoming the future. It was a memory company, and Japanese rivals had just crushed its whole business. So, Andy Grove made a wild call, exit memory, and bet the company on one 32-bit chip that could juggle multitasking. It packed 275,000 transistors, over 100 times the 4004, and it could run several programs at once. Your phone does that without thinking, every single day. The 386 set off an explosion. Every clone maker on Earth raced to build a computer around it. Compaq even beat IBM to the punch, and suddenly a machine that could run anything sat on a million desks. Intel started stamping its name on the chip too, Intel 386, to fight the clones selling 386-compatible knockoffs. It was the first time a chip had a brand, and the seed of a very long war with AMD. 1993, the Pentium, a name you could trademark, and suddenly a household brand. The Pentium was famous in a way no chip had ever been. Intel poured millions into Intel Inside, the campaign that turned a piece of silicon into a household name, marketed like soda. Then the Pentium met the internet. A math professor found a flaw. The chip could divide wrong. One wrong digit, 4 million logic cells deep. Intel shrugged, said you'd never notice. The internet noticed, and the first great online outrage was born. Months later, Intel issued the first full recall in chip history, replacing every faulty Pentium at a cost of $475 million. The real lesson was power, one invisible wrong digit, and the company that built the world's computers had to beg for forgiveness. Intel survived, but it never again told the internet what it should worry about. The Pentium 4, the chip that flew too close to the sun. Intel's theory was beautiful. Stretch the chip's pipeline absurdly long, and the clock can scream higher. 3.84 gigahertz? The marketing number keeps climbing. So they bet the whole company on frequency. The wall came at around 4 gigahertz. The Prescott core ran so hot that reviewers measured it with cooking timers. The jokes wrote themselves. Yes, you could fry an egg on this thing. Intel had bet the decade on raw speed and lost. AMD shipped the Athlon 64-bit, cooler, and in almost every test, faster. Call it what it is, a failure of faith. Intel believed the market wanted a bigger number. The market wanted a better chip. That hubris cost them the crown for a decade. The Core 2 Duo, the chip that saved Intel. While the desktop team chased gigahertz, a small lab in Israel got the unglamorous job, build a laptop chip that sips power. They quietly based it on the old Pentium 3 design, and their slow chip beat the flagship in almost every test. Intel killed NetBurst, rebranded that laptop chip as the Core 2, and watched it crush AMD overnight. The fastest chip in the world, running cool, overclocking like mad. It was a 40% jump in speed, day one, the kind of leap Intel used to take a whole decade to make. The lesson that humbled them. The company that invented the microprocessor was saved by engineers it had ignored. The way forward, it turned out, ran straight backward. Sometimes you win by going back to what worked. The Core i7 2600K, Sandy Bridge, the greatest chip ever made. It hit a balance the industry hasn't matched since: 4 cores, 95 watts, and a price that made enthusiasts grin. And because the model ends in K, the multiplier was unlocked. Anyone with a decent cooler could push it further. Buyers pushed it past 5 GHz on a cheap air cooler, faster than Intel's own top end, for a third of the price. This was the era Intel made look easy. Tick-tock, a new node one year, a new design the next, like clockwork. And it was so good nobody felt the urge to upgrade. The 2600K played modern games for 7 years. And that, quietly, was the problem. The 2600K was so good that Intel could coast. The next generations gave buyers nothing worth upgrading for. The greatest chip Intel ever made had, in a way, cursed them. The Core i9-900K, Intel's last great 14nm chip. Intel's famous tick-tock had broken. The next node, 10 nanometers, kept slipping. So Intel shipped the same 14nm chip for 6 years, slapping on a plus sign each time. 14, 14 plus, 14 plus plus, 14 plus plus plus. The plus signs of a desperate man. Intel answered with the 9900K, a great chip, suddenly just even. But AMD's Ryzen, built on a faster factory, arrived with more cores for half the money. Watch the clock. 2015, Skylake, the last true tick. 2017, Ryzen arrives. 2018, the 9900K, 14 nanometers last stand. 2020, Apple leaves for its own silicon, and the era closes on a quiet overtake. The decisive blow came in 2020. Apple walked. Intel's node delays had strangled the MacBook, so Apple began shipping its own ARM chip, the M1, made not by Intel, but by the very foundry AMD was using, TSMC. The most loyal customer in computing had built its future without Intel. The Core i9-12900K, the chip that copied the phone playbook and won back the crown. For years, Intel sold the same recipe, a few big, greedy cores. Alder Lake split the difference. 2 kinds of cores. Strong P cores for the heavy work, small E cores for the background noise, sharing one chip like a big engine and a scooter. It beat AMD in gaming again, ran Windows 11 like a dream, and, for the first time in years, made a PC you actually wanted to build. It jumped to 16 cores, 8 fast, 8 quiet, and for the first time in years, Intel had the fastest gaming chip on Earth. The fight back was real, but where did that trick come from? A hybrid of big and small cores, an idea Intel had long mocked as a phone thing. The world's greatest chip company was, for once, following. The Core i9-14900K, a chip that could touch 6 GHz, and quietly broke itself. Months in, owners started crashing, games dying mid-round, systems freezing for no reason. Intel dug in and found something awful. The chip's own microcode was feeding it too much voltage, and the silicon was physically damaging itself over time. The fix couldn't unbreak damaged chips. It could only stop the damage from spreading. Intel extended warranties, but for owners of a burnt $800 processor, no apology was big enough. And this time, the meltdown went straight through the heat and hit something else: trust. Builders who'd sworn by Intel for decades started clicking AMD. The name that meant safe suddenly meant a gamble. So Intel did what you do at the bottom: stop polishing the past and start over. New chips, new names. Core Ultra, built for an AI world, made on other people's foundries while Intel races to become a foundry itself. This is the biggest bet the company has ever made, and the whole industry is watching to see if it pays off. Intel built the machine the world runs on, then spent 50 years convinced only it could improve it, until the world it built finally caught up.